out to Bobby from Mississippi. Most of my resources, because I'm a state-based trade advisor, I'm going to be talking about Ohio-based resources. However, what's not in here is that I also happen to be part of an national organization. It's called NASBITE International. I happen to sit on the executive committee for it, and what that is, it is the training professional development arm that is aligned with trade advisors like myself across multiple states. And so what that means is if you are joining us from a different state and you don't see a resource on here, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you with the person that offers similar services that I do in your state if they are available. Not every state does, but many do. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into what I had prepared for everyone here. And I believe we are monitoring the chat here. Gwen is going to help me out with that. So if you have questions or comments along the way, I encourage you to continue filtering them through. I'll do my best to try to chime in where possible to answer a lot of those questions, but I know there will be time at the end to take on whatever questions I didn't address. So similar to a lot of the stats that Gwen shared from SCORE, you know, exporting has a tremendous impact on our economy. And these are just some stats from the state of Ohio alone. So Ohio is the 10th largest exporting state in our country, where there's roughly 15,500 companies that export. And the vast majority of those companies are small to mid-size. So, it's a myth that it's just the big companies that export. A lot of my clients are single person importer exporter companies, and you can develop a business based off of that. And so in our state, there's about 200,000 jobs that rely on the benefits of exporting goods and services. So in our state, in Ohio, we offer a couple of different layers of exporting support. And again, I'm talking about state-based resources. There are federal resources that I'm not going to cover, but I'm happy to talk about what those are. So just briefly, I'm going to go through what each of these are. I'll talk about the network that I'm part of and some of the state-based services and grants that are offered here in turn. So the first one is our SBDC, our Small Business Development Center Export Assistance Network. So these are all the different trade advisors we have across Ohio. Every county is covered. My center is based at Cleveland State in Cleveland, and we cover a good portion of northern Ohio, all the way to the Michigan Indiana border. So if you're joining us from a different part of the state, you could see what your territory is, and I urge you to contact the person in our network that services your part of the state if you're not from Northeast Ohio already. And what we do is, as trade advisors, we offer one-on-one support, no cost consulting, and everything from export readiness, answering the question that, two-thirds of you here said that you do not currently export. And maybe you're just playing with the idea of, does this make sense for me? Can I grow my business that way? So it's our job to help companies like you determine, yes, there is a market for it, or yes, but it's also quite limited, or yes, it's profound. Let's get going. Let's roll out the barrel and start to put you on a pathway so you can take advantage of what those opportunities are. And sometimes the answer is no. Actually, what you do is something that's very particular to the US, or it's here, or most other countries already have that solution in place. And we could just, help you come to that determination. So business planning, market identification and prioritization, I'll touch on more what that means. Country and product research, compliance is a big part of what we do, documentation, logistics, trade mission, we send companies periodically to other places, education and promotional programs, all of which I'll kind of cover a little bit later. That's not all. So in Ohio, we offer in-country contractors. So if you're a small to mid-sized company based in Ohio, you have access to this service. So what this means is the state has its own state tax dollars. We go out and we hire companies and individuals in other countries to act as our go-to consultants, and they will do on-the-ground due diligence. They'll look for potential customers, distributors, whatever they may be in those markets. And this is 100% taxpayer funded. And this is a very popular, I should say, and in-demand service that's for the right company. We don't want you to just do this if you're on a fishing expedition. And that's where working with someone like myself to help kind of set up what project would that look like, which country makes sense, and so on is something that the state would ask you to do ahead of requesting one of these services. But this has been around for over the last decade. There is also funding. So this is funding that comes from the State Trade Expansion Program through the US SBA. In Ohio, we call it Image, and this is something that's open to any state in the union to participate in. In Ohio, we offer up to $10,000 back on a 50% reimbursement basis on projects, developmental projects that your company could employ to expand your international trade presence by expanding your export. And there are a lot of sort of caveats of what that means, and there are some strings attached to that. But essentially, this is money that if you're going to spend on doing your international business development, you may be able to claim back some money through tapping into the STEP fund. I mentioned to you before trade shows. So many states, especially in the Great Lakes, we're very fond of doing this, will participate in trade shows and trade missions. So those are separate things, but oftentimes they're related. So what essentially this means is there's at Arab Health, for example, in Dubai. I had the opportunity to represent Ohio a couple of years there, and on the left is a picture. I took this picture of our booth, the Ohio booth, at one of the past Arab Health trade shows. It's the largest medical device show in the Gulf. It rivals one of the biggest ones in the world, and we had a booth there in the USA Pavilion, and we would invite our contractors there, and the contractors would set up meetings to have buyers come to the booth. In addition to the walk-up traffic, there were people from all over the world seeking to meet with Ohio companies, and this was just a way for us to accelerate that process. And this was also something that the state of Ohio generously contributed to defraying the cost of that expense for Ohio companies. And here's just a couple more examples of other trade shows that Ohio has sponsored, and not so long ago. The other thing that Ohio does, this is rather unique. I can't promise every state offers this, but for the past 12, 13 years, we've run an internship program that is specific to international trade, supporting international trade. And so in this process, we would identify and train up and coming students, college students that are studying international business or other disciplines. Could be supply chain marketing, could be a foreign language major, could be any of a number of majors. Actually, we're very open-minded, and we place them to work in Ohio companies to serve 12-week internships, and the state will repay the company 50% of the wage that you pay them. We ask you to pay them $19 an hour, but there has been some amazing, amazing outcomes for this. Companies will have access to a high-performing student. We're very, very selective. In most places, the acceptance rate is about 10% of our students who get admitted to the program to begin with. And so we're looking for real sort of cream of the crop, highly motivated, educated students, and we'd place them in companies that oftentimes they have never heard of before. And some of these companies can be very, very small companies, and they jump right in and they can make a difference, and they make themselves invaluable to their host companies. And as you can imagine, many of them end up staying on with their companies. We've had many that have gone on to become managers, and they've managed their own interns years later and so forth. It's been a real virtuous cycle. The students end up paying for themselves very, very quickly. So this is something, if there's someone online right now, we are still accepting applications for host companies. That deadline will come up very soon, but if you're at all interested, I'm happy to talk with you or share more information about how to get involved with that program. Another way that we help companies out is really through a process of working with them a little bit more long term. So in Ohio, we have the benefit of hosting two export accelerator programs. And so this is how I got involved in the trade assistance community. When I worked at my previous company, I joined something called Global Target, which now I'm kind of the manager of at Cleveland State. And what the premise of this program is that if you were to join us, you would be on a path with us for about, 7, 8 months, where we would get to know you very intimately. We would develop, a pathway for success. And really, it's an opportunity for us to guide you, maximize all the resources that are available to you, both state, federal, even private sector resources, and to help build out a path that's meant just for your company. And we do this in collaboration with mentors. So, similar to the mentors of SCORE, we have people who are volunteers. They don't ask anything other than they want to pay it forward, pay it back to companies of Ohio to see them succeed. And we've got mentors from all kinds of different industries. Most of our mentors have been with us for at least 8 years or longer, and it's been a highly touted and awarded way that companies have been able to kind of get off the ground, get off the blocks, if you will. There's another program I'm also affiliated with called Export Success that runs out at the Toledo area, Northwest Ohio. It is very similar, but it is meant for more early stage companies. So if there is someone that is on the very ground floor, there are a couple of different programs that you could choose from that would be stepping stones to help kind of build a foundation for you to create an export pathway. I just briefly want to share with you a couple of events that if you enjoyed this program, if you want more information, a couple other things that we're offering. We did do a collaborative webinar in January with the folks at Ohio Apex. So they are a government, they're like us, except they do government contracting resources. So if you had any interest in selling to the government, you could scan the QR code, or when you get this later, you could click on the link to watch the recording. A lot of it is some repeat of what I shared on this webinar, but the Apex part of how to get started in government contracting may be of interest to you. We did one also on cybersecurity and export compliance. There's another one if you'd like to watch the recent recording of that. You're welcome to. Coming up in May, we are running a workshop that's an in-person opportunity at Cleveland State where we have an entire day focused on just how to ship your goods internationally. So this is going to be a deep dive explanation on, all the points about import regulations, customs clearance, how to pay for things. I'm just going to barely touch the surface on any of those in this program, but if you want more of that deeper dive explanation from, A to Z basically on how international trade works from the transaction standpoint, this is the program that you should attend. And the last one before I'll resume sort of the content stuff is we are running a 3-day boot camp, which is the all points comprehensive how international trade works. It's a deep dive 3-day program on everything from sales to how to find distributors, what are patents, how do they apply internationally, logistics, hiring people, whatever, you name it. If you can believe it or not, we'll fly through all those topics in a 3-day program that we run here at Cleveland State. It is in person, but that's one that we're also offering in early May. Okay, so I have here like why do manufacturers need us? You could also say maybe you're a manufacturer, maybe you're not. It doesn't matter. Like why do companies need assistance? Why do they need help? Because selling and shipping international is way different in the US than it is internationally. They want help in logistics. Oh, they want tariff issues. Tariffs have been an issue far before the Trump administration changed everything. But I mean, of course, it's gotten a lot more complex and continues being complex. But tariffs have always been around, and we've always gotten questions about tariffs. People want to understand how to clear customs. If you get into it long enough, there may be questions about certifications, registrations, laws, patents. International can be risky. It can be expensive, but it can also be very rewarding. There's many of our successful companies have gotten to the point where our goal for most companies is at least a quarter of your revenue coming from foreign places. But lots of my clients have, 60% and upwards of their revenue coming from foreign sources. And that could be a really good thing for a lot of practical reason. It is a lot of upfront work, but if you could get that engine going, it can be the kind of revenue source that just feeds itself. And that, with quote unquote minimal effort, it's never minimal, but when you are able to set up overseas sales, you may be able to tap into markets that your competitors aren't in, that you could have, an open field on tapping into new clients. And if you have someone else that's doing it on your behalf, it becomes even more automatic. And so it can be very, very desirable if you do it right. Here's a couple of actual client scenarios. There was a company in Lake County that we worked with that were looking to find a fulfillment center in the EU. Mind you, this is not a very large company, but they had distribution in the European Union and they wanted to find a single location that they could do distribution. And we were able to recommend to them a couple of sites. And they did end up choosing one of the locations, but they just didn't know where to start with. And we said we introduced them to a couple of perspectives and they ended up choosing one of those. Another one is a company in Stark County. They were a company that did heavy duty machinery, and we were able to introduce them to a non-competing peer mentor. And that peer mentor gave them some recommendations on the design of their product, and they ended up transforming one of their lines that they sold to the European market, and it ended up becoming the number one seller. So that wasn't even we couldn't necessarily take direct credit for it because it was the mentor that gave them that recommendation. The last example here was a company in Summit County, a very small company that does electric vehicles, and they were just looking into getting in the Canadian market, but wanted to understand the regulation sort of roadmap. And so we ended up creating for them a very clear explanation of these are the steps that you would need to take in order to be in compliance with selling your items into Canada. And they took the step of bringing on one of our interns, and the intern, that was the first assignment that she had, and she was so successful with it that this company has gone on to be a real success story for us in many ways. And the best part is that the intern we placed her with, that we placed them with, is still working with them today. I do want to say that there's a few things that we also offer in addition to those other things. I know it seems like a lot, and it's maybe drinking from a fire hose here, but tangibly, what I do a lot of research for companies. I do answer a lot of questions for them. Like, just if you wanted to call me, or send me an email of like, hey, give me your take on this, I'm happy to do it. But to make more meaningful progress with a lot of the companies. We have a lot of research capabilities here. I've got multiple people in my staff, multiple research students, for example, and we pay for a lot of high quality databases that are not available to the public for free, and they go above and beyond anything that AI is capable of matching today. But a lot of things that we're asked to do are helping companies define like what countries make the most sense to me, and we call this market prioritization. So just help me explain how should I view the world. It's easy to think of like the U.S. versus international. Like international is like one solid mass that you treat the same way, but that's really not how you should go about thinking about it. And as soon as you start going down that path, you realize that that's not a real viable way of doing business, and you'll still end up needing to do a lot of the paperwork even if you try to keep all of your responsibilities to a minimum. So these are the types of reports that we advertise to do for our clients. Global market prioritization, regional prioritization, single country reports, single country pricing analyses, and so forth. And so if there's any interest from your company to explore, these are very popular services that we've offered to our clients. Okay, so what I want to share with you now is to get a little bit to start the conversation on how international trade works. And so I've just pulled one of the workshops. This is actually an abbreviated form of one of the workshops that we do in the May 3-day boot camp thing that I mentioned to all of you. So I wanted to focus on market entry methods. And this is just a real high level explanation of the basic ways that companies approach getting into foreign markets. It may make sense for you, it may not, but this is just some of the options, like how people would normally do it in the beginning. So, what we advise is that when you enter into market, it should be a proactive decision. A lot of companies I know get pulled into it kind of by sheer gravity. You might be receiving messages or phone calls or whatever it is. Someone's instant messaging you from a different country saying, "Hey, we'd really love to have your products in fill in the blank country." And you may say, "Okay, sure," or you might want to pause. But what we prefer is when companies think about it ahead of time and they're not just being like pulled into a marketplace by their customers. So because the different methods come with different short and long-term rewards and headaches, if we're honest. Okay, so this is the typical progression of like these different export methods. It looks like this. So when you have a product or service, and if you are getting those messages that, hey, we'd love to have your product in Peru or something, that's a great sign. This means that there is a desire and interest to have your product in that marketplace, and that's a good indicator that maybe there's something there. Um, but in the beginning, for a lot of companies, they might not even realize that they're, especially if it's a product, I guess less so if it's a service. But if you're selling something, it very well might be going to someone else in the US, and that person could be then turning around and like reselling it outside the country. You might have a customer that's a really good customer in Chicago, but little did you know that that person has contacts in Lithuania, and then they're taking what you've sold to them and then shipping it off to Lithuania. Um, so that's like on the very far end of it. All the way up to someday you decide that you want to install your own office in Lithuania, and that would be the other end of the spectrum. And over time, there's different trade-offs that come with that. Your investment goes up, your control goes up, but it's very rarely a linear process like that. The dynamics of it, this is a bit of an eye chart here, but the different dynamics of all these different modes of entry are a little bit more nuanced. Like there's how much investment there is, the profit share, your risk, your amount of control, and so there. This isn't my chart. This was by Castiglione, but I do find that this is really true that not every one of these entry methods are made the same. So the timing really needs to be made up of answering a couple of things, like how much do you want to go in this? Um, So there's a question here, government contracting. So Bobby asked about government contracting. Yeah, Bobby, I'd probably refer you back to one of my earlier slides where we did the Apex recording, where you can learn a little bit more about that. Unless you're talking about foreign government contracting, which is a completely different topic, and it's the combination of both of those expertises. Oh, foreign government contracting. So for foreign government contracting, you that these two things do mix. So I'd say all these same questions still apply. There's an additional layer that understanding the government bureaucracy, especially if what's called a controlled item is involved, ups kind of the level of difficulty. Okay, so asking already a government contractor for us. I'm not sure if I understand what you mean here, Bobby. Already a government contractor for us? Okay, maybe if you wouldn't mind fleshing out your question a little bit more, I'll come back around to answering it. But I'm going to go back to this for just a moment. So these are some of the questions that we would ask our clients to consider when they're going down this path of deciding, well, what makes sense for me right now? I mean, oftentimes we're not talking about these things won't happen overnight. They won't happen in a couple of weeks. This is very often the result of a couple of years of putting time and energy into discussing how would you want your business to grow. And it could start off, ultimately we want this to be manageable for you because it sounds great to just open up your sales to anyone around the world that wants to buy from you. But a lot of companies say that that becomes overwhelming very quickly, depending on, of course, what your bandwidth is, your motivation, how complex your product is, how small it is, big, heavy, liquid, whatever it is. It's volatile. You're selling to governments. Each one of those things come with it kind of an administrative burden. And so the biggest thing is like understanding, you know, what are you going to be capable of handling? What is your level of support to be able to make this successful? And how much energy can you dedicate to making this a success? So, as I was kind of laying out before, like the two broad ways of thinking about selling when it comes to exporting now is, this is taking into account that your product or service is going to a foreign buyer of some sort. And the most common way that people start is doing indirect exporting, meaning that you've sold your whatever it is, fill in the blank, and someone else takes that and then they sell it, maybe without you even knowing that it's going to a foreign buyer. And the three major ways that happen, the biggest way it happens is through an export management company. Some of you may be interested in starting an export management company. If anyone here is a Seinfeld fan, you might remember George Costanza, who said that he was George Vandelay, the importer exporter. And so he was talking about an export management company. And essentially what that is it's a company based in one country where you're buying goods primarily and you have customers in a different country, and so you package up all these things that you're buying here, and then you ship them off. I had a client once who, she built a business out of buying stuff from Costco, and she had a discount and was able to get things in bulk. And she had a relative in a different country and started a small business shipping goods that she was able to buy here inexpensively to her relatives that were in a different country. I can't remember where it was right now, but she was able to make a small margin of profit, but it was enough to kind of entice her to keep going, and it funded what her next project was. She was basically her own small export management company. There's two other
Excuse
examples
me.
of this. Yeah. Sorry, is there
Excuse
a
me.
question?
I just wanted to say
Yeah.
that our questioner did flesh out the question.
Okay.
He says, sorry, he says, con I'm already a government contracting company in the United States, and he would like to bid on foreign solicitations.
Okay. So in that case, there are if then Bobby, you're probably familiar with SAM in the U.S. So there is something akin to that internationally, and that's the clearinghouse that most people would go to, and it's run through, I believe, the UN. I'm a little bit rusty on this, but there is a portal where you can collect government contracting but it's not like in a universal scale. But when there's like a United Nations funding attached to it, and other governments are also welcome to apply their bids there. But for the most part, a lot of the government contracting bids are handled similarly to how we operate them in the U.S., where there is a central repository of government um, projects that are out there, and every one of them is going to have their own bid requirements. Very often, let's hang on to that question. So I'm going to come back to um, that because it's my experience is that it's very difficult unless you're an exceptionally large company to handle those government contracting bids directly. That you almost always need to have an in-country partner that's there to help assist that. So let me get back to that. And I can't think of the name of the portal, but let me look into that before we wrap up here. I'll maybe it'll come to me.
And before you go on,
Uh-huh.
there were a couple of questions that maybe we will want to address subsequently from Robbie, who asks, he talks about he wanting to export refurbished dialysis machines to foreign countries, and how can you help with that?
Oh, I'm not seeing that in
And
the chat. Okay.
it is actually in the Q&A.
Oh, what?
And the next one is India. This is also from Robbie. He makes the statement that India is the prime candidate to receive these machines from the US. 18 million people are suffering from chronic kidney disease.
Okay, so the question is about how to ship refurbished medical equipment.
Would you
Is
agree with that, Robbie?
okay. So I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? I can't see it.
Yes, that he agrees with that. Is I want to export refurbished dialysis machines to foreign
Dialysis machines.
countries.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I think let's still hold on to these questions because I think that there's a lot of buckets of these questions I think are going to be similar. So if I don't directly answer it by the time we've wrapped up, I'm happy to come back to them because I think that you're going to find a lot of similarities in answering each one of these. So let me just briefly go over what these different models are, and then maybe we could return to them. So direct exporting is when you're working through someone else and you have an idea who the end consumer are. So the first one is direct to consumer, and that means that you just handle that inquiry directly, and you're responsible for shipping that good, and you have a one-on-one relationship. But it also means there's a couple trigger points I want to say. All right. So very often this is the way that most people end up starting their direct exporting relationship. There's no intermediary, there's no one else. You're the end point of selling it is someone in a different country, not named the United States. And what will happen is there's lots and lots of things that go back and forth between various countries. And a lot of that merchandise is personal. And if it's a small enough shipment, it may be possible for customs officials to list this as a personal shipment and therefore give it less of a scrutiny. If you hire a small parcel carrier like a FedEx, a DHL, UPS, they will do a lot to help smooth things out. And many times they'll be able to answer and fill in a lot of the question and fulfill the documentation that would be required to get the goods in a country. Um, and so that's where a lot of companies begin. It's not a promise, it's just kind of how things work. However, if the goods are greater than, and every country has its own threshold, but there will be something that triggers the customs officials to flag it as being a commercial shipment. So it could be that it surpasses a certain value threshold. Like in the United States, the most common value threshold is $2,500. So if it surpasses that threshold, um, or you're not using a small parcel carrier or you're not using a small parcel carrier, then there's a higher degree of scrutiny that will be applied to that shipment. And suddenly you may be asked questions on, whether or not you've quote unquote done things the right way. And that means have you filled all the documents that may be required to get that good in? Are there any reasons for concern why this country may limit or restrict or prohibit that good from coming into the country? Those are more often the types of questions that we wrestle with. In on top of all the other questions of like, well, how much will it cost, and how much will it cost my buyer potentially to bring this stuff in? Is there a market for that? To begin with, those would be a lot of the questions that we would want to answer up front. But just really briefly, let me go through some of these so I can make time for all the rest because maybe this will answer a few of your questions and maybe they won't. Um, Beyond that, the next phase that people might tap into to get their goods into foreign countries is licensing. And this is where you have a technology, let's say, that you're giving to someone else. I mean, it works the same way in the United States, but licensing is where you have an intellectual property You allow someone else in a different country to utilize that to sell to their own people. I mean, if you think about like music, art, computer software, these are the very typical ones. So a company in this country isn't necessarily handling the usage. Microsoft in the US may not be handling the Microsoft users of their platform in like Italy or something. They might have handed that off to a different company altogether if it wasn't their own subsidiary. Um, a sales agent is also another vehicle that companies might utilize when they're trying to grow their international business. And this is it could be a sales rep, it could be someone that's an employee or not, it could be someone that works off a commission. The most important thing is that they don't take title of the goods. They never own it. They just have a vested interest to make sure that transaction is complete. So, you might have goods that are going. If you're in the US here, you're selling to someone in Thailand, and you might hire someone just to cover your entire Asia Pacific area. Their primary job is to find customer leads, to manage the whole sales process, to bring those sales opportunities to you, and oversee that the shipment gets made. But that's something that you here in the U.S. are going to be responsible for shipping off and getting to the other country. You're responsible for all that. The biggest one is an importer distributor. And an importer distributor is like a sales agent, except they're permanent. They take title, meaning that they have their own location, usually. They typically own a warehouse. They will take possession of the goods. And as such, they have the right to determine what your end consumer price is. They also have a greater ability to penetrate foreign markets than sales agents. And so I would say that, if you're going after government contracting, it's highly likely that they would ask for you to have an importer distributor. Many foreign government contracting, it is set up, and in the U.S. we're the same way. We give priority to our own people. This is our taxpayer dollars that are going into funding, some project in our country. And so first and foremost, we want that money to come back to U.S. based companies. When foreign companies set up their own government contracting bids, it's very similar, that they want to know that there is a local entity that's involved in it, even if what's being supplied comes from somewhere else. And my experience is that in most cases, they are reluctant to give those bids directly to a foreign company. It would have to be a large, well-known company, that has probably groomed a relationship, that's very familiar with the bidding process. But even in the case of my more savvy companies that have done this, let's say in the medical device field, they 99% of the time will still their odds of getting the bid go astronomically up when there is a locally based partner in that country who's making the solicitation of the bid on their behalf. And more times than not, it's an importer distributor. Although it is possible to go with a sales agent, it tends to be more difficult because of the permanence and because sales agents are not always based in the country where that bid is coming from. I'm not trying to say, across the board it never happens, but the importer distributor is the method that we go back to more times than not. That is the most universally best of all worlds kind of situation, that they have the best ability to penetrate markets. The least amount of risk for an exporter to work with, and they are more have a better track record, generally speaking, on producing long-term results. But it's difficult to find them at times, and there's a lot of upfront work that has to be done to make sure that you've got the right distributor. So. And this is just an example of like the relationship that you're the exporter, they sell into a foreign country, and they're responsible for managing those countries' people. The next two I'm just going to gloss over because these tend to be on the high end of like the investment. There's joint ventures, and this basically means that there's several companies that come together to form a new entity to service a different client market. And then the last one is the subsidiary or a wholly foreign enterprise. So this means that you have started up your own smaller version of your company, and you own the whole thing. You take on all the risks, etc. And that's your own office. So like Google set up their own office in Dublin, for example. And then there's some recommendations on what to do if things go wrong. Um, how you can end the relationship and when you're switching between one of those modes for another. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about contracts and how to set things up if you want to, but I know that there's probably more questions that you want me to answer that are more specific to why you're here. So I'm happy to do that. That's really, what I wanted to share with you in terms of to give you a flavor for what the basic methods of entry will be to get yourselves into foreign markets. So let's see here. Um, while we're doing this, I don't know, Gwen, if you would like to cue me up with whatever questions you want me to tackle next.
Um, so we have a question. This is from Deborah. She says she's exporting food processing equipment to West Africa. Do you cover that region and how does it work? She's considering exporting food processing equipment
Considering selling food processing equipment to Western Africa,
to West Africa, yes.
West Africa. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yes, there'd be some. The first answer is yes, we have resources. The first line of resource would probably be to schedule a conversation with myself or someone else who's a trade advisor in your area, if you're not part of our territory, to help understand that a little bit more. I mean, what type of food processor are we talking about? Is it electronic, non-electronic? Is it a small electric? Is it a large electric? Full disclosure, I used to work in small kitchen electric appliances. This is really my field. I know a bit about that. Um, so we could begin mapping out. There's different things you could do to find out, where there's more customer demand than not. Where is your competitive presence? Does your product comply? One of the biggest issues when it comes to electrical appliances has to do with certifications. If this is a brand new product and I'm assuming that it's one that you've created, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's one that you have from somewhere else. Do you have distribution rights there? But the biggest one would be is your product allowed to function in that marketplace because there are safety regulations, and if you're able to demonstrate that the product does meet local safety requirements, then that opens things up a great deal. But you can't take that for granted. Barring, let's suppose that you've done all of that, then the next question would be, okay, if you've been set on this marketplace and you need to find distribution or customers, this is also where we could have, either our own contractors. We do have a contracting office that covers all of Africa, where we could potentially set you up with a project, do a customer deep dive search to find either a representative, a distributor, or potentially customers in that marketplace for you. We also have relationships with I mean, I have a relationship with a kitchen appliance trade association, and so there's specific resources that are for certain industries that may be even a more dedicated resource for you to tap into their network on getting ins, let's say, on who the buyer and distributor might be for some of the largest, kitchen appliance retailers in that area if you sell through retail.
Okay. Uh, well, we do have one request that you put the last slide up again.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you're doing that, so wanted to go back to Robbie's question regarding the refurbished dialysis machines
Hmm.
that he wants to find a distributor to sell and service these machines in India. And he has a source in the United States who has 2,000 machines in storage. Wow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there is a very healthy market, resale market for a lot of products. There's a couple of my clients that do sell in the used, refurbished medical device space. India has come up quite a lot in our circle lately for business development purposes. So again, the short answer is yes. Again, the state of Ohio has an office in Delhi where we would, we could set up a project for you to run a search to find a distributor. But again, I would go back and just want to be sure that you've done your due diligence on, you know, unless you've already done this, you've already been tested on this, just to make sure that there aren't going to be any hiccups, that there aren't any issues that might get in the way. Do you already have a pretty good idea of, your acquisition cost, the cost of shipping, what we call the ultimate landed cost, that by the time the people there receive it, that they're getting what they think they're going to get? Um, because there's a lot of cost accelerators in international trade, and we've seen that dramatically in the last year with, the tariffs are just one piece of it, but shipping costs play a factor in this. If the goods arrive and they don't conform to what the buyer's expectation is, meaning like it's too expensive, then that might throw off, the entire sort of value chain for them. So it's a lot of like we could help you clarify how much is it going to be, how much would it be to send it there, and how much can you expect to offer them as far as a price, and that too can determine a lot of the attractiveness of selling it there. Beyond that, finding importers and distributors tends not to be the problem. The bigger issue, especially when it comes to India, is getting on the right page in terms of communication and building some kind of synergy. Historically, Indian business professionals are kind of notorious for not having the same relationship to technology that we're used to in the West. So, which is to say, I've seen this happen multiple times. I've spent time living in India. Um, so there's something of a oftentimes a different way of kind of kickstarting that relationship. And usually what that means is like if you're really committed to doing this, my strong recommendation would be to go down this path, finalize a couple of candidates, and then meet them, spend time with them in person, have them come to the U.S., things like that, or possibly look at appointing someone that's a U.S. national that could go back and forth to India. That's just, broadly some of my experience on what I've seen make that relationship work most successfully.
So Bobby is not going to let you off the hook on that portal name.
Bobby, I cannot. I'm sorry. I had my screen down to try to look for the name. I can't think of what it is, but I promise that I'll spend a little bit of time noodling on it. It'll come to me, but I can't think of it in this moment. So I'm sorry.
So
Okay,
I
so
don't see any more open questions
well,
right now.
I see one from Hugo. So do you provide any
Okay,
assistance for companies that are looking to import from overseas items that would be sold here and also can be exported to other countries? Am I okay to take this slide down, you think? Hopefully everyone has, and I know everyone will get a copy of this, right? So
right.
they're all
Everybody
welcome
will get a copy.
to
Yes.
contact me later if they'd so like. Um, so the short answer to that is yes. I mean, we have been set up to service first and foremost exporters. Um, However, in the last year, we've also received a lot of inquiries from people on understanding tariffs and importing goods in the United States. So the short answer to your question is yes. And so whether that means before I go any further, U.S. Customs and Border Protection tend to be rather transparent on how to bring goods into the United States. So if you haven't been to their website, they have an FAQ for importers and exporters, for that matter, on how to bring in lots of goods into the United States. There have been a lot of changes in the last 14 or so months to this, but more often than not, they'll publish a lot of information on how you can get goods in. If if you're bringing in something that is at all questionable, um, meaning like it's potentially toxic or exotic or explosive, I would absolutely advise you to contact a customs broker, a licensed customs broker. There's customs brokers that are standalone service. There's customs brokers that work as part of international freight forwarders. There's many freight forwarders in the area. Because likely you're going to need them to coordinate that importation for you. However, for questions on the basic steps of it, for us to help you determine whether or not there's what the expectations would be. I was contacted by someone. I had a meeting this morning with someone, and they were interested in importing exotic fruits to the United States. Exotic, not just the fruits, but the plants that grow the fruits. And there are a series of steps when it comes to how that would work. And we're able to look up, okay, this would be the associated tariff. These would be the associated stipulations that would come with it. So yes, we can provide that consulting to you. And of course, when it comes to like taking that and then re-exporting it, well, that's what we were built to serve to begin with. So, absolutely, that's not a question.
Um,
Okay. So, Hugo asked a different question here. I'm more interested more referring to vetting suppliers in India. Well, okay. So when it comes to vetting suppliers, that answer would be no. We could probably give you some referrals of questions to ask, but as far as a government's provided, it's this is I don't want to say already a stretch, but you have to understand that from a state or federal government standpoint, the emphasis is really on trying to get more of our goods out and money in rather than our money out and goods in. So you're not going to find too many government provided services to go that step of helping facilitate importation. And what you're talking about of like vetting suppliers. Now we would there is kind of a separate related entity that we would do at Cleveland State, which is to service that need. That's not something that is I don't want to necessarily advertise because it's not available to everyone all over the state or other states. But in my center, if you came to us and you wanted help doing supplier vetting, there are some things that we would be able to offer, but I'd still give you muted expectations on that. We would most likely refer you to a private consultant to do that. Or you could potentially you could contract with our foreign contractors to do this, but you're going to be paying for that directly as a service. That wouldn't be something that's taxpayer provided. Okay, this is a question that is not only directly related but intersects with this topic. Do you need an apostille for any of the documents that you send overseas when you're importing and exporting goods? That's a great question. So I didn't even go close to touching the topic of documentation, but depending on what your product is and what country you're dealing with, it is possible that you are going to be asked to obtain any of a variety of documents that we otherwise would never ask for in the United States. So the question of an apostille would be this is a document that's provided by a consulate that could describe that you're authorized to make this transaction with a company in a different country. So, for example, I used to work for a pet food company, and we would sell pet food all around the world. And whenever we had shipments that would go to Costa Rica, we would have to go to the Costa Rican consulate in Washington, D.C., and have them fill out an apostille for us. And they basically said that we were allowed to make this transaction happen. Um, so it's highly varied. Some countries are very I say strict, but they can put a lot of layers. As I mentioned to you, the overall dynamic of how international trade works is that it is considered a privilege, not a right. And for every country, they can make it as difficult as they want or as easy as they want as their government sees fit. And in some cases, you find that there's some markets where they're intentionally trying to make it difficult because they don't necessarily want an open door of a lot of products and services automatically coming into their country. And in other cases, they're very open to it, and they feel it's in their best economic interest. So an apostille would definitely be an example of a type of document that may be required for some goods, not necessarily all the time. Okay, shameless plug. My company offers these services for everyone in this chat that need. Okay, thank you. The go-to notary. Very good. Thank you.
Well, Nate, here's a question. Are there any scholarship opportunities for the 3-day boot camp?
Scholarship opportunities. Well, as a matter of fact, there is a scholarship opportunity. So for companies that participate in our export accelerator, so we are running an accelerator right now. The cohort actually begins in 2 weeks. Those companies would receive a scholarship to attend that boot camp. Apart from that, we typically don't, but I'd be curious. I mean, I'm happy to drop my information in the chat here. If you are curious, maybe we could talk about this, and I'll see what's possible. But for right now, we reserve that scholarship benefit for companies that are already enrolled in our accelerator.
Our
Oh,
minds were doing the same
yep, you beat
thing.
me to it, Glenn. All right.
Okay. So I'm not seeing any more questions, Nate, unless you attendees have some more questions.
Oh, now I'm seeing the Q&A section. I wasn't even like paying attention to that, but that's great. Thank you
Okay.
for
That's what I'm
for
here
being part
for.
of that. Yeah, great. I really appreciate how animated everyone was in this conversation. I give a lot of sort of these general export 101s. And it's not always that there is a lot of back and forth, but people, they came ready. I'm really happy everyone here came ready with a lot of very specific questions, and I appreciate that a great deal. So I hope that that means that you may be interested in interfacing with us. I'd love nothing more than to connect with you and to help you kind of get started on any of these services that I mentioned.
Okay. Thank you, Nate. Doesn't look like there are any more questions. So we're going to go on and end this webinar. And you're right, it was very lively, and I got a lot of good information out of it. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to the Cleveland Score chapter for this invitation. I've really enjoyed it.
Okay, bye bye.
All right. Bye now.